Welcome to Gulf War, the battle after the war. Today I'm going to go over some benefits. Something that has recently changed. It's a bill that's been passed, and you may be familiar with it if you're following. It's the bill S2950. I found an article relating to it, so I'm going to read the article first from Military Times, and then I'll jump over to the actual bill. The bill's a little difficult to read, so I'll try and get through it as best I can. The title of the article says, "Should service in Iraq and Afghanistan be a recognized health hazard for vets applying for benefits?" So in other words, they're asking, should what we were exposed to be recognized for benefits? And the article goes on to state, lawmakers introduced a bill Thursday that would recognize the health hazards posed by oil well fires, burn pits, and other pollution sources in Afghanistan and much of the Middle East. An effort, they say, would help ill veterans who apply for benefits. The Veterans Burn Pit Exposure Recognition Bill S as in Sam 2950 would declare that service members who deployed to the Middle East in the 1990 to 1991 Persian Gulf War and after to Afghanistan and Djibouti following September 11, 2001, and to Iraq beginning in 2003 were exposed to toxins. The bill stops short of establishing service connection for specific diseases and does not guarantee disability benefits for ill veterans. But it would require the Department of Veterans Affairs to concede that veterans were exposed to pollutants if they served in the named locations during the specified timeframes, effectively eliminating a need for them to prove that they were in close proximity to a pollution source. Sponsors Senator Dan Sullivan from Alaska and Joe Manchin from West Virginia say the legislation is needed because currently VA requires veterans to show evidence of their exposure to support benefits claims and frequently rejects claims on the lack of evidence on exposures. But since the locations of burn pits and possible health effects associated by their use may never be completely known, the proposed legislation states it would eliminate the requirement that they prove proximity. The burden of proof regarding known exposure currently faces Navy and Marine Corps Vietnam veterans who served on Navy ships and were recently granted presumptive status for exposure to Agent Orange. These blue water veterans who have a disease linked to the use of defoliants during the war must prove the ship they served on sailed within 12 miles of the shore. West Virginians have seen firsthand how long it takes for the Vietnam-era veterans who were exposed to toxic chemicals like Agent Orange to receive the care and benefits they deserve, and the toll it took on them and their families. I want to make sure that doesn't happen to this generation of veterans, Manchin said. The bill reaffirms our commitment to those in uniform and ensures we will not wait decades to tackle this issue head on, Sullivan said. And just so you're aware, this article was posted, let's see if I can find it, November 22nd, 2019. So in his statement here, I'm going to read it again. The bill reaffirms our commitment to those in uniform and ensures we will not wait decades to tackle this issue head on. 2020, 1992, do the math. In February 1991, Iraqi troops set Kuwait oil wells on fire, producing clouds of smoke that turned the skies to twilight and blanketed U.S. troops with fine oily dust that covered skin, clothing, belongings, weapons, work, and living spaces. In Afghanistan and Djibouti after September 11, 2001, and Iraq beginning in 2003, the U.S. military used burn pits to dispose of the refuse generated by military operations, including food, waste, household trash, but also plastics, batteries, computer parts, animal carcasses, hospital waste, and furniture and more. And if you've listened to some of my previous casts, you will have heard me mention the carcasses, the dead camels on the side of the road, the rubble from buildings being blown up, all of that stuff. You know, we were walking through it, even as naval soldiers. When you think we're on a ship, we're not always on a ship. So troops reported that soot from the pits often coated work and housing areas with a fine green-black powder, and many developed chronic coughs, sinusitis, and other respiratory symptoms they referred to as the Iraqi crud. At their peak, more than 270 burn pits were in use in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Djibouti. As of March 9 remain active, including 7 in Syria, 1 in Afghanistan, and 1 in Egypt. That's current day. That's not back in the 90s. The other thing that I can add to this is we actually pulled into Djibouti, Africa. We threw our lines out, got all moored up, and before anybody could get off the ship, we were untying because my captain had contacted the higher ups and said, there's no way I'm letting my soldiers off this ship in this port. It's disgusting. So I think we were tied up in Djibouti, Africa for maybe 2 hours max before we pulled our lines back in, never touching ground, turned around and left. Veterans, veteran service organizations, and some physicians attribute rare cancers, some respiratory diseases, and other health conditions seen in Gulf War and post 9/11 troops to exposure to these conditions. In addition to conceding that certain hazardous duty stations pose a potential hazard health, the bill also acknowledges an information gap regarding the location, use, and hazards posed by burn pits, and encourages ongoing research by DoD and VA. Veterans who would be covered under the bill include those who served in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, beginning on August 2, 1990. Those who served in Iraq from August 23, 1990 to February 28, 1991, and beginning on March 19, 2003, veterans of Afghanistan and Djibouti beginning on September 11, 2001, and any other locations set forth in the VA Airborne Hazards and Open Burn Pit Registry, or as deemed by the VA Secretary. The bill names fine particulate matter, 16 types of hydrocarbons, 15 volatile organic compounds, and 17 dioxin compounds as known toxins. Several veterans service organizations, including Disabled American Veterans and Paralyzed Veterans of America, pushed for this legislation. This bipartisan bill will help get rid of red tape and assist affected veterans seeking burn pit related benefits, said Randy Reese, Executive Director of the Washington headquarters of Disabled American Veterans. For years we've known of the adverse health effects caused by burn pits, and in that time we've seen too many seriously ill veterans struggle to get help from the VA because they lack the documentation to prove what everyone already knows, that they were exposed to toxic chemicals released by these burn pits while serving overseas. Retired Navy Yeoman First Class Lauren Price, whose organization Veterans Warriors has supported legislation that would require VA to declare presumptive conditions related to Iraq and Afghanistan service, praised the bill as one that would significantly help veterans, and unlike the legislation the group has supported, may not encounter the same pushback from budget-conscious lawmakers. It's truly a concession bill saying, we concede that there were nasty chemicals all over the place. All you have to do is prove you were there and if you have a disease. It would mean the VA adjudicators simply couldn't reject your claim because you couldn't prove you live a football field away from a burn pit, said Price, an Iraq veteran. It's a good bill. And while I do agree with it being a good bill, it still needs a lot of work, but it's something. It's more than what we have now. So I'm going to go through the bill real quick. It's not quite as long as some of the other bills that have been introduced, but it is difficult to read. So I'll post the article and this bill on my Gulf War page at Gulf War Vets on Facebook so that you can read it yourself. Some of you more savvy people with medical terminology education can get through it better than I can, but I'll do my best. Bill S2950 states, let's see, there's a lot of garbage here at the top. To amend Title 38 United States Code to concede exposure to airborne hazards and toxins from burn pits under certain circumstances and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives, all the United States of America and Congress assembled. This act may be cited as the Veterans Burn Pits Exposure Recognition Act of 2019. Findings and sense of Congress. Congress makes the following findings. The health of some members of the armed forces and veterans who served in certain locations, often multiple times, may have been affected by their service near burn pits. This is all very carefully worded, by the way. There's nothing that states, yes, it's all may have, or we might think, or there's nothing, nothing defining. Determining the location of burn pits and the scope of health effects associated to exposure remains the subject of much investigation and research by the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Defense, other than government agencies, and national academies of sciences, engineering, and medicine. The location of burn pits used by the Department of Defense and partnered armed forces and the possible health effects associated by their use may never be completely known, as some locations and air and soil quality data is fragmentary, and the research involved with establishing links between burn pit exposure and health conditions by necessity is complex, years in length, and in the end, in some cases, inconclusive. In the interim, though, some veterans have already been adversely affected by the exposures to the burn pits, and their claims to certain benefits furnished by the Department of Veterans Affairs can be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. When filing a claim for certain benefits furnished by the Department of Veterans Affairs, the application requires that each veteran show evidence of their exposure to burn pits. However, if the evidence of exposure to burn pits is not provided, the claim is often denied. It's the sense of Congress that if it is determined that a veteran was deployed to a covered location during a certain period, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs should concede that the member or veteran was exposed to certain toxins, chemicals, and hazards, and a concession of exposure, as described in paragraph 1, should not alone be sufficient to entitle one to health care or disability compensation under laws administered by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Concession of exposure to airborne hazards and toxins from Department of Defense and partnered armed force burn pits. Chapter 11 of Title 38 United States Code is amended by adding at the end of the following new section S2950, which is concession of exposure to airborne hazards and toxins from burn pits. In subsection A, in general, for purposes of section 1110 and chapter 17 of this title, any veteran who during active military, naval, or air service was deployed in support of a contingency operation while so serving and as part of such deployment served in a covered location during a corresponding period set forth under subsection B shall be considered to have been exposed to the toxins, chemicals, hazards enlisted in subsection C. The covered locations and corresponding periods set forth under this subsection are as follows, and this is where things start to get a little hairy with words. Actually, it's not too bad yet, but we're getting close. Iraq in the following periods. The period beginning in August 2nd, 1990 and ending on February 28th, 1991. The period beginning on March 19, 2003 and ending on such date as the Secretary determines burn pits are no longer used in Iraq. The Southwest Asia Theater of Operations, other than Iraq, and the period beginning on August 2nd, 1990, and ending on such dates as the Secretary determines, burn pits are no longer used in such location, including the following. Keep in mind, burn pits are still being used to this day. First one is Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and United Emirates. Afghanistan, and the period beginning on September 11, 2001 and ending on such date as the Secretary determines, burn pits are no longer used in Afghanistan. Subsection D, Djibouti, Africa, and the period beginning on September 11, 2001 and ending on such date as the Secretary determines, burn pits are no longer used in Djibouti. And the reason for that is, like I said, they're still being used. It's why it's so important that we get out there and join these studies, because our children are over there fighting in this crap that we got sick from and dealing with the stressors that we dealt with, and they're going to come back with the same symptoms that we already have. So it's important that we jump into these studies, the reputable studies, and give them as much information as we can about our time served, as little as a blood sample, as much as information on a 10-question survey. Whatever it takes, we need to find something to help them, if not for us. Such other locations as are set forth by the Airborne Hazards and Open Burn Pit Registry, established under Section 201 of the Dignified Burial and Other Veterans Benefits Improvement Act of 2012. There's a reference here, Public Law 112-260 and 38 USC 527. I'm not going to click on that link because it's probably going to open up something bigger. Like I said, I'll post both of these so you can research it on your own, but at least you have something to work from when you start reading. Where did I stop? The corresponding period set forth in such registry. Okay. In subsection F, such other locations and corresponding periods as the Secretary, in collaboration with the Secretary of Defense, may determine appropriate in a report the Secretary of Veterans Affairs shall submit to Congress not later than 2 years after the date of the enactment of the Veterans Burn Pits Exposure Recognition Act of 2019, and not less frequently than once every 2 years thereafter. Number 2, subsection A location set forth under this subsection shall not include any body of water around or any airspace above such location. Subsection C, toxins, chemicals, airborne hazards. Subject to paragraph 2, the toxins, chemicals, and airborne hazards listed in this subsection are as follows. Okay, here's where we get hairy. This is going to be fun. Don't laugh. Particle matter including the following: PM10, PM2, and PM5, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons including the following: acinophenthine, acinophthalene, anthracene, benzoanthracene, benzopyrene, benzofluoroanthene, benzopyrrolene, benzofluoranthene. Now there's also, you're going to see this when you look at it, but there's also individual letters. For instance, I'll back up. The benzopyrrolene says G, H, I. So I'm assuming those are 3 different strains. And then this benzofluoranthene also has a K in there. So I don't know if they're using that as an identifier. Chrysene, dibenzanthracene, and this one also has the same thing. It says A and H in the middle in brackets. Fluoranthene, fluorine, endinopyrene, and this one has a strange identifier. It's 123-CD. Next one is naphthalene, phenanthrene, pyrene, volatile organic compounds including the following. This is a new section. Okay. Acetone, acrylane, benzene, carbon disulfide. Okay, this word is longer than I am tall. Chlorodifluoromethane. Got it. And then chloromethane, ethylbenzene, hexane, another one, hexachlorobutadiene, butadiene. Yeah, I don't know. Hexachlorobutadiene, I think it is. And then this one also has strange identifiers. It's M-P or M/P dash, that looks like xylene. XYLENE, xylene, I think. And then methylene chloride, pentane, propylene, styrene, and toluene, I think. And then this next section is ridiculous. It's toxic organic halogenated dioxins and furans, including the following. I'm not going to read through all these because it's all numbers and letters. It starts with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, HPCDD, and just continues that same format all the way down. And there's probably 15 here, I think. The last two are huge as well. And they have strange identifiers. In the beginning of this first one, it says XVI, and then octachlorodibenzodioxin. And then the second one is, this must be Roman numerals. It says XVII. And that one is octachlorodibenzofuran. And then we go into things that I can read. Subsection E. Such other toxins, chemicals, and airborne hazards as the Secretary, in collaboration with the Secretary of Defense, may add under paragraph 2. The Secretary may add to or remove from the list under paragraph 1 as the Secretary determines appropriate in a report the Secretary shall submit to Congress not later than 2 years after the date of the enactment of the Veterans Burn Pit Exposure Recognition Act of 2019, and not less frequently than once every 2 years thereafter. Subsection D. Medical examination and medical opinions. If a veteran described in subsection A submits to the Secretary a claim for compensation for a service-connected disability with evidence of a disability and service in a covered location and corresponding period set forth under subsection B, and such evidence is not sufficient to establish a service connection for the disability, the Secretary shall provide the veteran with a medical examination, and the Secretary shall request medical opinions as to any causal link between the disability and a toxin, chemical, or hazard set listed in subsection C. When providing the Secretary with a medical opinion requested under paragraph 1, the provider shall consider the total potential exposure through all applicable military deployments and the synergistic effect of all combined toxins through inhalation, dermal exposure, and ingestion. Subsection C. Definition of burn pit. In this section, the term burn pit means an area of land that is used for disposal of solid waste by burning in the outdoor air. And subsection B, which is the last one in this bill, clerical amendment, it's just a reference. The table of sections at the beginning of chapter 11 of such title is amended by inserting after the item relating to section 1118 the following new item, and it references 1119, concession of exposure to airborne hazards and toxins from burn pits. So it must have been changed at some point. That's what amended means. They updated it. So that's it. That's the new bill for 2020. Hopefully it will open some doors for us. Like I said, there's nothing in there that's concrete that says, yes, we know that the GWI exposure is directly connected to these toxins that were released. Everything is may, or it's all very vague talk. So get out of it what you can. If you don't understand the bill, you're welcome to message me. I'll be more than happy to sit down with you and break it down and talk about it. I can do a further podcast on it, explaining each one if you'd like. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I'm going to cover on the bill Um, I, I think I think there's enough information here that it should be fairly understandable. Um, Again, if you have any other questions, you're welcome to message me. I always try to respond either the same day and definitely minimum within, or maximum within 24 hours, minimum within an hour. I'm pretty good about that. Today's a pretty rough day for me. My pain level is ridiculously high. I don't know if the tears in my eyes are broadcasting through my phone, but it's rough. My hands hurt, my joints hurt, my head hurts. I need to lay down and take a nap. I feel a migraine coming on, but I wanted to get this out so that you guys would have it. There was talk in one of the Go For Illness groups just as early as yesterday about exposures and what they did to us and how they're responsible for Go For Illness. But keep in mind, it's not just exposures. Everybody is trying to lump all of these symptoms that we have into one specific thing. And it's not any one specific thing. You have to understand autoimmune disease comes about for many different reasons. And it's normally not just one thing that causes it. It's normally a group. If you think of it this way, you take a 70-year-old man and you start him on a mile walk, and as you're walking with him, you continually add things for him to carry. Eventually he's not going to make to the end of that mile. And that's kind of what an autoimmune disease is. It hits you one at a time, sometimes quickly, but one at a time until it starts breaking your body down. And other symptoms will start taking effect as this happens. So you can't blame just one thing. It's not just vaccines. It's the idea that we all started with 18 to 20 vaccines, and then we stressed our body out. Whether you got the vaccines in boot camp or you got them on your ship, you were doing other things that played a part in your body breaking down faster than it should have. Going to war is not the same thing as going to dinner with your parents on a Sunday evening. It's high stress all the time. You don't get rest. Nothing is easy. Your workload changes because you're stressed. Your ability to focus and function changes because you're stressed. I can describe to you a moment when I was going through the Straits of Hormuz. I was sitting there talking to a friend of mine because we were all at general quarters, and I was able to pop up through a hatch and look out both sides of the canal. And all you see for miles through the straits is Laws rockets pointed at you. And one of the questions I had posed to my friend was, we carry all this weaponry and all this ammunition, and it's all loaded and ready to fire, but what are the chances that we survive? We're floating on water. These guys are on land. Yeah, there's a good chance we're going to blow up a good portion of them with the amount of firepower we have on the ship, but how many of them are going to get rockets off into the side of our ship? That takes people away from firing and doing something to save us so that the ship doesn't sink. You know, by the time you get through the straits, you could be badly damaged. And how are you going to pull into a friendly port? You know, you could just sink right at the end of the straits. I mean, there's so many things that go through your mind when you're in a position like that. So that kind of stress, it doesn't go away. Those kind of memories, they don't go away. It continues to build stress. It continues to eat at your body, your mind, and it helps feed the actual disease that you have. So, you know, while you listen to all my podcasts and you think back to everything that's gone on and you're paying attention to what's going on now, give yourself a break. Clear your head and get out and just do something. Get away from the news. Get away from all the little nitpicking back and forth between the Democrats and the Republicans. Get away from it. Clear your mind. Go out and enjoy something. Go shoot pool. Go to the beach. Go for a walk. Go for a ride. If you're in a wheelchair, go for a roll. I mean, you just got to get away from it, disconnect. Because if you don't, it's going to make you crazy and it's going to make your symptoms worse. You'll end up with all kinds of other things going on with your body that you don't need. Do these studies. They're so important. I'm going to mention this in every podcast until I can't anymore. It's so important. These people are willing to help us. They're independent. The VA is threatening to shut them down because they don't have anybody to volunteer to make progress in the studies. So do these researchers a favor, and if you can, if you're able, go. Some of them pay. You know, it's an extra $100 in your pocket or whatever it is they pay you. At least cover your costs. But do something. You know, we went to war. Now we're going to war again. Just for a different thing. It's not as stressful. And most of the time, the people in the studies and the research, they get you in and out quick. I myself have volunteered for one. I'm waiting for them to call me back. As soon as I get the call, I'm out of here. I'm headed down to Miami for 2 days, and I'm going to go through their testing, and then we'll turn around and drive back up. So, you know, do what you can. I'm doing what I can. Anyway, that's enough of my rant. Have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to next week's cast. It's going to be fairly simple. It's going to be all the music that I discussed with you previously about being able to just disconnect and have some quiet time with music to just close your eyes and do some meditation or whatever it is that you do to relax your mind. So that'll be next week. Next week I won't be talking. You won't be hearing my voice. All right, so have a great rest of your week again, and don't forget to hug a vet.